Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name's Dustin Knobloch. I'm the Director of Community Education and Advocacy at the Mental Health Association of Monmouth. What a mouthful. And today I have Jessica Slattery joining us on a presentation regarding adult protective services through Family and Children's Services. I want to take a second to acknowledge that Jessica is volunteering her time to be here. And I also know that she is covering a little bit more territory as she is covering for the other manager who is out on maternity leave. So we know that she is super busy and just very appreciative of her taking some time to talk to us today. So what's been happening in our agency and working with families, right, with staff and families, is we've had a lot of questions around adult protective services, especially questions relating to oftentimes psych services. When is it appropriate to contact APS, or what's not appropriate? So we asked Jessica to join us today and just provide an overview of the services and just a little bit of clarity. I do encourage everyone to ask questions. I'll be monitoring. What I would ask you to do is actually put everything into the Q&A, if possible. If you put it into the chat, that's fine too. Just easier for me to keep track of everything in the Q&A feature. And Jessica will answer questions throughout. And just some housekeeping. You can only see and hear us. We cannot see or hear you. Okay. So Jessica is the Director of Middlesex County Adult Protective Services. She completed her Master of Social Work at Rutgers University. She has a BA degree in Family and Child Studies from Montclair State University. Jessica completed her graduate field hours at St. Clair's Behavioral Health on the Children's Crisis Intervention Unit and the Metro Regional Diagnostic Treatment Center in Newark, where she provided therapy to child sex abuse survivors. She's been with Middlesex County Adult Protective Services for 9 years as a case manager, and supervisor has been the director of the program since February 2022. So without any further ado, Jessica, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. So first, I'm just going to kind of go over a brief overview of our agency, Family and Children's Service, and then I'll really jump into what we're all here for, which I guess is the Adult Protective Services. So Family and Children's Service is the oldest nonprofit social service agency in Monmouth County, dating back to 1909. It was originally referred to as the Long Branch Society for the Improvement of the Poor. And basically the program that it initially started as was what we now call Operation Sleigh Bells. So basically it was to deliver presents to the underprivileged population in the community at the time. We still have that program every single year. I believe currently we usually are able to deliver gifts to about 1,500 children in the Monmouth County community. Part of our longevity, I think, is really attributed to the fact that our services that we offer is always changing. We're always developing new programs and altering services we're providing based upon what we're seeing as the need of the community. So currently, a lot of our programs really are focused on addressing services to the elder population and vulnerable adults in the community, which is also part of why we're starting to refer to ourselves as FCS as opposed to Family Children's Service, because there is a lot more services available to adults as opposed to children. This really just kind of goes back about what I was just saying. So, we're really trying to meet the diverse needs of residents in the community, at-risk populations. We are really providing home care, respite care, support services to elderly and disabled individuals who are living in the community. And we also have a great amount of volunteer programs. So that really gets not only, other adults in the community involved, but gives a lot of the seniors in the community a sense of purpose because they could get involved in some of our volunteer programs that we offer. This is a list of all of our current programs. Obviously, Adult Protective Services, the Representative Payee Program. We have 42 certified supportive care home health aides, And then, the rest of the programs, there is on our website, if you are interested in learning more about any of these, it goes into a little bit more detail about each of these programs that we offer currently. All right, so APS, as mentioned, I am the director of Middlesex County. Our director of Monmouth County is on maternity leave. So some of the questions you may have that are specific to options in Monmouth County, I may not be totally familiar with, but if there are any questions like that, I will definitely do my best. Just full transparency. So what is Adult Protective Services? It is a program established to promote safety and independence of vulnerable adults. So the majority of our clients are elderly, I would say, 80s, 90s and beyond. But we do address clients who are 18 or older with some sort of vulnerability factor, which I'll get into in a little more detail later. So the programs exist across many states, I would say almost all states in the country. In New Jersey, there is a program for every single county. And all of our statute is based upon the New Jersey Adult Protective Services Act of 1993. There will be a few different definitions I'll read verbatim from the Social Services Act. So, residing in the community, our clients must be residing in the community. We do not go into licensed facilities. We don't open up cases on clients who are in long-term care, like nursing homes or group homes that are licensed through the state. So all of our clients are in their homes. Of course, they may have a temporary hospitalization or be in some sort of subacute rehab facility temporarily. But for the most part, they have to be residing in their homes for us to open up a case. A vulnerable adult means 18 years or older residing in the community setting who, because of physical or mental illness, disability, or deficiency, lacks sufficient understanding to make, communicate, or carry out decisions concerning his or her well-being and is subject to abuse, neglect, or exploitation. So that means, a lot of our clients, if they are around 18 or that age group, they have a developmental disability or something like that. But as mentioned before, a lot of them are just, seniors and the elderly. The role of the APS worker is to stabilize a crisis situation using the least intrusive methods while respecting the individual's right to self-determination. We're not talking about children here, we're talking about adults. So they do have the ability to make their own decisions and to live in certain situations for as long as they have the cognitive capacity to make the decision to do so. Who do we serve? Is it the community, family members, the agency making referrals, or the clients? Ding, 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 it's the clients. So until you've lost the ability to make rational decisions, like I just said, you retain the right to make decisions. We will have a lot of people calling our office saying, I really want my mom to move closer to me. Can you do that? Or an agency saying that this client really needs to, go along with whatever intervention they're trying to impose on them. We are not working for the referral source. We are working for the client. So it is what is best for them and what they want. How do APS workers assist? So when we go out, we evaluate the situation. Of course, we get, a lot of information during our intake process, but we're really going out with a neutral, clean slate to see, firsthand what's going on in the individual's home. If the individual wants assistance, attempts are made to connect them to the services. So that could be home health assistance or something of that nature, medical attention, legal assistance, whatever it may be. We request and review records to help determine if abuse, neglect, exploitation is taking place. We are able to get bank records, medical records, all of that with or without the cooperation of the client. If a crime is suspected, we will obviously report to law enforcement, prosecutor's office, attorney general's office, whatever appropriate agency needs to get involved. We are also able to get access orders or protective orders if the client is non-compliant, and we really do think that there's an issue with capacity. We are able to sometimes gain access to the home that way. Usually it's not necessary. But if that really was, something that needed to be pursued, we will do it. So recognizing abuse, neglect, self-neglect, and exploitation. Abuse. So by APS standards means the willful infliction of physical pain, injury, or mental anguish, unreasonable confinement, or the willful deprivation of services necessary to maintain a person's physical and mental health. So forms of abuse, obviously physical, pain or injury, sexual, non-consensual, or sexual contact, psychological and emotional, inflicting mental pain, anguish, or distress. When it comes to sexual, a lot of times it's not as common with our population, but one example that does come up is if it's a husband and wife and suddenly one of them has dementia. Are they still able to consent to whatever sexual activity is happening? Indicators of abuse. So behavioral signs of the individual, that's pretty universal for any population, whether it be children or adults. There's, the fear, anxiety, withdrawal, reluctance to speak, change in alertness, depression, or anger. Physical signs. So with our population, it's very common for it to be, someone is sitting in a soiled diaper for 8, 10 all day long, hours a day. And their caregiver isn't addressing their needs, which of course leads to pressure ulcers, bed sores, that kind of thing. And then of course it could just be hitting, kicking, punching, things of that nature as well. Environmental signs, so use of restraints or inappropriate living quarters. So sometimes they'll put their elderly mother in the basement because they don't want to deal with her, or they'll be, they take over the bedroom and have the elderly person living on the floor. Or a lot of times if a child is living in the home or something and they want to go out to work every day, they'll lock the elderly person from the outside into a bedroom so that they can't get out and they can't wander away if they have dementia or Alzheimer's or something like that. Signs from the abuser, so just the way they speak to the adult, any suspicious or aggressive behavior or controlling. Who is most at risk? So those who are secluded or left unattended for long periods of time. A lot of elderly people, they could even have their adult children pass away or their spouses pass away. A lot of perpetrators will refer to obituaries that you could just Google and see who's passed away recently and who doesn't have anyone left in their life. And that's who they will, in especially cases of financial exploitation, that's who they will go prey upon. Current or former victims of domestic violence. Of course, there's always that cycle that goes down and continues. Those who are abusive themselves. So perhaps the person or the APS client was physically or verbally or emotionally abusive to their children when they were younger, and now they've gotten to a point where they can't defend themselves, so their children are finally taking retaliation out on them now that they're elderly. Those with a dysfunctional or financially dependent adult children. A lot of our APS clients have adult children or grandchildren with substance use issues and alcoholism and that kind of thing. And they lack family or friends to check on their welfare. So this is neglect by APS statute, means or act or failure to act a vulnerable adult or his caregiver, which results in an inadequate supervision or care or services necessary to maintain the physical and mental health of the vulnerable adult, and which places the vulnerable adult in a situation which can result in serious injury or which is life-threatening. So forms of neglect, there's intentional neglect and unintentional neglect. I would say, an overwhelming amount of caregiver neglect is just completely unintentional. Someone being overwhelmed, an adult child that now has to act as their parent's caregiver and doesn't know what services are available, doesn't know what is appropriate, is still trying to allow their parent to have that right of self-determination, but it could get to a point where they really lose capacity and their judgment is so poor that they really should no longer be doing that. There's physical and emotional failure to provide necessary services or maintain physical and mental health. Financial, so obviously, a lot of elderly people have a power of attorney or they have a child on their bank account. Failure to pay their bills, buy them food, buy them, if they do need new clothing or something like that. And then abandonment. So sometimes, the adult gets to a point where they require more care than their caregiver ever thought would be necessary. And they really just try to desert the person. They'll drop them off at the hospital and say, I'm not taking them back, that kind of thing. Once you are assumed caregiver, so there's obviously, power of attorneys, people that are legally obligated, but there's also an assumed caregiver. So if you are their spouse or if you are their adult child that has been living in the home forever, you assume responsibility to look after that person. You can't just dip. Indicators of neglect. So there's the physical signs, very similar to the signs of abuse. Environmental signs, so they can be in restraints, inappropriate living quarters again, lack of appropriate supplies. They'll just be on a mattress that is a billion years old and is brown, that kind of thing, with no sheets or anything like that. Lack of food, we always check the fridge for food to make sure that they're able to, that they have food. Outdated medications, another huge thing. During our initial assessments, we always ask where the medications are and kind of record them and eyeball if it seems like the right amount of meds are in there to see if they're taking them as they should be. And then victims that appear to be abandoned. Signs from the abuser, again, the way they speak to the vulnerable client, they prevent contact and they try to isolate them, and then a hostile attitude or resentment. And that's to us or the client themselves. Okay, self-neglect, failing to meet one's own essential physical, psychological, or social needs, which threatens health, safety, and well-being. This includes failure to provide adequate food, clothing, shelter, or healthcare for yourself. So reasons for self-neglect are physical limitations, cognitive, financial limitations, and lifestyle choice. So a lot of our clients, they may no longer be able to drive, so they haven't been seeing a doctor, or they physically can't get out of the house anymore. In a lot of situations with self-neglect, it's really just their pride. They're not able to accept that they can't do these things anymore, so they just continue to live that way and not see medical professionals or whatever it may be. Financial limitations, people end up living way longer than they thought, so they blow through all of their savings or something like that. They can't afford their medications, they can't afford whatever home care or home assistance. We obviously know how pricey that can be. And then a lifestyle choice. So there are some people that just want to live the way they live. I'm sure many of you see this all the time. So again, self-determination. The role of adult protective services is to see if that person still has capacity to continue living in whatever unsafe or unconventional situation they may be living in. Indicators of self-neglect, physical signs from the individual. So needing medical care, but not seeking it, poor skin, nail hygiene, unkempt or matted hair, inappropriate attire for the weather. We'll have some clients that are bundled up in 90 degrees and they don't have any heat. Or the opposite, they'll be wandering around the street in bare feet during a snowstorm. soiled clothing, pressure ulcers, the malnourished appearance and dehydration, confusion and disorientation. Environmental signs, just their homes needing major attention and being potentially condemnable, inadequate utilities, hoarding, piles of paper and unpaid bills. We'll have clients that have mounds of bills all over the table, and they could be dating back, years. Or we see a lot of cat hoarders. So people will have dozens and dozens of cats, dead cats. That's a huge one as well. Exploitation means the act or process of illegally or improperly using a person or his resources for another person's profit or advantage. Types of exploitation are financial and exploitation of person. Majority of our clients are financial exploitation. Signs from the victim, so they're unaware of their banking activity, they can't locate their personal papers, they haven't seen a bank statement in forever. Many of our clients can't even tell us which bank they use, which is obviously a major red flag. So like I said, there's that stack of bills. They may not have, utilities that are working anymore because they haven't paid their bills. We'll get a call from their landlord saying that they're months and months behind on rent, but they should have the means to be paying their rent. We have we have a couple that when we do review the bank records, it'll just be things on there that are not age appropriate. So, once I had a client that had a lot of transactions going on at a club in New York City. My 90-year-old client with dementia was obviously not venturing into New York City and going dancing. So those types of things are more obvious. But then also, you could see would the client be using an Uber all the time? Possibly, but also if we know for a fact that they're homebound and they're not going anywhere, then no. Signs from the exploiter, so they'll be controlling, possible history of substance use or criminal behavior. A lot of times we'll get referrals directly from banks, so they'll say, they had to call the client to go over something and there was someone in the background telling them what to say or something like that. So when it comes to reporting to APS, we have intake coordinators in both of our counties. So they are responsible solely for taking the new referrals, and they ask a series of questions so that we can, first of all, determine whether or not it is an actual case appropriate for adult protective services, but also so that it gives our social workers a heads up on what to expect when they go out in the field. So all of your typical demographic information, and then we get into the specifics of what is going on, what are the medical conditions, who's involved, and then why are we calling today specifically? So sometimes situations will be ongoing for many, many years or months. What is the change that suddenly today has made you so concerned that you decided to call Adult Protective Services? All calls are confidential. You can make a call anonymously where you don't even tell us who is calling. We don't prefer that because it is helpful to know who we're speaking to and get an idea of how they know the information and how they're involved. But of course, you can completely deny to tell us who you are. If we know who you are legally, if you say you want to remain anonymous to anyone else, we can't tell the client or medical professionals or whoever else we're talking to who made the phone call. We respond to cases of abuse and neglect neglect and exploitation. We technically have 3 business days. Obviously, if someone is severely neglected, we'll get out there as soon as possible. And in our abuse cases, we have 24 hours, business hours to respond to the home. So where to report? So sometimes we'll get a call and someone will say, my son just abused or physically abused my mother. Please call law enforcement first. Don't call us first. that needs to be addressed. That's an assault, that's a crime that needs to be addressed by law enforcement. Get them out there first, and then you can call Adult Protective Services. Because again, we are not first responders, so we cannot rush out to the home that second usually. We need some time to get everything together. So, and we're also very short-staffed always. We could double our size of case managers, and that would be dandy. And also we respond to the entire county. So, we're based out of New Brunswick in our case. So if we need to go all the way out to like Carteret or Matawan or something, sometimes it does take us a little bit of time. So please call law enforcement first. Each county has a designated adult protective services provider. You report the case to wherever the client resides. So even in like a case of exploitation, if you know that the exploitation occurred at an ATM, in Bergen County, please call wherever the client is living, wherever they are a resident. Same thing with like abuse. If they were abused visiting a daughter, you still call wherever they live. I could actually send a copy of these two forms out. It just has the contact information for every single New Jersey County Adult Protective Services, and then a little bit more information about APS. So the victim must be 18 years or older, residing in the community. A lot of this we already kind of went over. Is believed to be actively subject to abuse, neglect, or exploitation, or severe self-neglect, and is believed to lack sufficient capacity to carry out, or communicate decisions concerning his or her well-being due to a disability or deficiency relating to a disability. So Adult Protective Services does not open up cases for domestic violence situations unless the person who is being abused has that vulnerability factor. Mandatory reporting. So most states in the United States have certain individuals designated who are considered mandatory reporters. So they're required by law to report suspected abuse, neglect, or exploitation of a vulnerable adult to Adult Protective Services. That, of course, includes healthcare professionals, law enforcement officers, firefighters, paramedics, emergency medical technicians, and also banks now are mandated reporters. So if they see something suspicious going on with one of their customers who's above 60, usually they will just automatically generate a report to us, whether or not they know if the person really truly has any major vulnerabilities, just based upon the fact that they're 60 or older. So our process and program. So what happens when APS is contacted? The workers, like I said, we screen the referral, we have an intake process. If we do determine that it's within the parameters, then we initiate a face-to-face contact within the timeframes I mentioned earlier. So we have to go out to the home and try to meet with that person within those 3 business days or 24 business hours. We collect information from the client, the perpetrator if they're in the home, formal and informal supports. Of course, we speak to the client alone. So if there is a perpetrator in the house, we will ask them to maybe step outside, or if we feel comfortable enough, depending on the layout of the house, they have to go into a different room or something. But we're obviously not interviewing clients right in front of their perpetrator. We also will almost always, at least our initial assessment, will be done unannounced. So we don't let the client know that we're coming. We don't let the family know we're coming. We don't want to give anyone a heads up so that they can alter whatever's going on in the home or try to cover anything up. If it is accepted, which means that after that initial assessment, yes, it does seem like we need to take further intervention. We develop an action plan and connect the client to services. So all records and communications pertaining to any report or evaluation or service provided pursuant to APS, adults are confidential. So we do not provide a copy of any of our assessments or any of our records to anyone. Even if we get a subpoena by the court, which sometimes happens, we're still protected by that law not to really share any of our documentation with anybody. So limitations that nobody likes. Well, we like some of our limitations sometimes, but APS cannot remove a vulnerable adult from the home without court intervention. So it's not like DCP&P where we could just swoop in and see that the person is self-neglecting or is neglected and take them out of the home. We cannot force an individual to accept services, and we cannot fund alternative living settings or emergency home care services. We actually do have some funding for temporary home care. It's obviously limited, and we would not really fund home care unless we know that there is a more long-term plan in the works. So how to not become a victim. Assign a power of attorney or someone you trust. It does not have to be a family member. It has to be someone you trust. Even if, you know, you're on the younger side or you're completely you have to be completely competent to assign a power of attorney, but I tell everybody to assign a power of attorney so that if and when the time comes that you need that person to step in, it's already established and taken care of and ready to go. Of course, name a healthcare proxy. Make sure the individual is aware of your wishes and what you want. Execute a will and an advance directive to make sure that your important documents are accessible. And always talk to your proxy family members, friends, medical providers about your wishes and where the documents are located. My grandma calls me every several months because she wants to go over all of her wishes as I'm her healthcare proxy. So that's really important, is to just have that open communication. If you are the healthcare proxy or power of attorney or the adult child to someone that doesn't have a power of attorney, definitely have that conversation with them and try to get them to appoint a power of attorney. A lot of times they will think that if they agree to this and appoint a power of attorney, it means that right that second, they're no longer going to have any say in any of their personal affairs, or they're no longer going to be managing their own finances. That's not the case. It's more than anything, a safeguard so that if they do unfortunately deteriorate to that point, you're already ready. All right, so that's that. I know that was a lot of information in a quick period of time, but happy to answer any questions.
We do have one question.
Okay.
I think you pretty much covered it, but who can I reach out to in Monmouth County? My mother has her adult undiagnosed daughter living with her. She's isolated from all family members. She's financially using mom's money for her and for her adult children inappropriately.
Okay. Yeah, so that would be, so if it's Monmouth County, right? I heard that. So that would be our agency, Family and Children's Service. The obvious Monmouth County Adult Protective Services. I will send out their number and everything. I think offhand it's 732-531-9191. But I'll provide documents with all of that information for the entire state.
Wonderful, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Another question, what if someone has no one to be the POA or medical proxy?
Okay, so in that case, we could potentially do a guardianship or a conservatorship. So especially in a case, so power of attorney needs to be appointed when the person still has capacity to make decisions. So if, and this happens a lot, someone is demented, or they have some sort of cognitive impairment and they're kind of coerced into signing a power of attorney, that is not valid. They have to have capacity. If the person loses capacity, that's when we would potentially, or it doesn't have to be us, but if there's anyone else willing to do so, they would petition the court and do a guardianship. That's more complicated of a process, obviously. The person has to be deemed incapacitated by 2 physicians in order to be eligible for a guardian. And then you have to file through the court system. So there would be a formal hearing where a judge decides whether or not this person needs a guardian, but that would be the option in most cases. If they still have capacity and they need a POA, there would be a potential conservator if they were agreeable to it, or there are attorneys that also can be power of attorneys for fee for service. And then also senior care options, which I believe services the entire state. They have people that could be power of attorneys as well.
Okay, thank you. Another question, when you go out, are you going out with police?
Usually we will go out alone. So the social worker will go on their own. Obviously, as I said, we have a very extensive intake and screening process. So if we're made aware that it's a potentially unsafe situation, we will go out with a buddy, another social worker, or we can call out law enforcement. We try not to do that because that'll just escalate the situation. But of course, our safety is important. So yeah, if we need to, we will go out with law enforcement.
And it looks like all of our questions are answered as of right now.
Great. I guess that means I did a very thorough job.
You did do a very thorough job. I know one of the things I can bring up, if you just want to speak to it a little bit, is, working with families of, or parents of adults living with serious mental illness, we run into a lot of hoarding type situations,
Right.
Which have become incredibly difficult as the years have gone on, and trying to get anyone to intervene it's just been tough. I know you had spoken before a little bit about animal hoarding, or if you had anything else you wanted to add.
Yeah.
Little
So,
curious.
our clients, and this is something that is probably one of the most difficult parts of our job, is getting certain people to understand that we cannot take a client only because of a mental health issue or only because of a substance abuse issue. It has to be a comorbidity along with, the developmental disability or the Alzheimer's, dementia, MS, whatever it may be. We do get a lot of calls on what we call like solely hoarding situations. So, it's a mentally ill person that is a hoarder, which is quite common. So we would not be opening up a case based upon the fact that, they may have some sort of mental health component, which causes them to be a hoarder. If there is the dementia or the Alzheimer's or something that goes along with that, and the hoarding is just another thing, another issue on the list of issues, then we would open up a case on that. I'm sure all of you are well aware, if you work with this population, it is nearly impossible to get a hoarder to dehoard their home. So that's when the guardianship comes into effect for APS, because our clients are usually incapacitated and not able to make decisions for themselves. So then, that would be a whole legal process of getting that guardian or getting that power of attorney to step in and take care of the hoarding against the compliance of the adult.
Thank you. Any other questions? Feel free to put into the Q&A. Otherwise, I think we're about ready to round up. Is there anything else, Jessica, that you'd like to share?
No, not really. You can always give me, if anyone has a situation they want to bounce off me privately or something like that, you can always call me directly, or our Monmouth office, which would probably be more appropriate, if your clients are mainly in Monmouth County. But we're happy to just, even give advice. We never take a referral and just say, all right, that's not us, we're not calling this person back. We will always call back with some sort of other reference. So that's just, we're a good source of information, even if it isn't really an appropriate APS case.
Much appreciated. We do
Yeah.
have another question that popped up. Who pays for the guardianship or de-hoarding?
So we do have funding, we have grants. So we have a pretty good legal budget where we're able to fund our guardianships. If there is family involved, or if the family member is the person that wants to be the guardian, we will probably not pay for it because we have so many clients that have absolutely no one and they don't have the financial resources. But yeah, if it's a case where, you know, it needs to be the Office of Public Guardian or something like that, and the client has no money, then we do have funding to pay for it. Same thing with the hoarding, depending upon the cost of the hoarding, you know, we'll have people go out and do estimates. We're not going to pay for a hoarding case if we know that there's nothing put in place to prevent it from happening again. So we're not going to, if we know this person has been a hoarder for 30 years and whenever their house is cleaned out in 2 months, it returns to the same condition, we're not going to bother using our limited funding on that person, unfortunately. There has to be a game plan going forward so that we know it's not going to return to that situation. And then just to go back to the guardianship, if the client has money, let's say they have, you know, $100,000 in assets or more, millions, that they are not able to access at that point due to a capacity issue, then at the end of the guardianship, the judge could order that anything is reimbursed by the client's funds. Same thing if you are an adult child that petitions for the guardianship, you can, and then you become the guardian, you can reimburse yourself with your parents' money if they have the assets available, because really it is a service for them. So that's not like illegal in any way. That's not considered exploitation.
Good to know. Thank you. Any other questions, folks? Well, Jessica, I want to thank you for taking the time. This was very thorough. I know that I've learned certainly more than I knew before. And I'm sure people will be in touch and just are appreciative of knowing there's a number to call if they have questions or they have a specific situation. That's definitely something that's appreciated. So well, thank you. This has been recorded for everyone who came today and also for the people that registered but may not have been able to stay on the whole time. So everyone will receive the recording. That will be coming directly from me. So I'd like to say within 24 hours, but I'm going to say I'm going to shoot for Friday. So you can anticipate a recording by Friday, and just thanks again.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me.
Have a good day, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.